The Alpha and Omega Protocol, a data-dense architecture of the Hebrew timeline by L.C. Brand. Chapter 1. When dozens of isolated cultures around the world who never met or talked to each other tell the exact same specific, crazy story, it means they aren't making it up. It means something real happened to their shared ancestors before they split up and spread across the planet. In digital data, nobody bothers creating fake copies or knockoffs of a file that doesn't matter. No one would read them. However, the presence of 100 corrupted or twisted versions of a story proves that an original high-value master file existed first. Therefore, the ancient Hebrew stories about a worldwide catastrophe and a coming hero aren't just stolen myths. They are the original uncorrupted master files of history, and an enemy has been flooding the internet with fake versions ever since to make you ignore the truth. The uncreated Creator spoke, and the frequency of his voice exploded the universe into existence. This could be understood as the introduction of the personhood of the Alpha and Omega. This is the beginning and end of everything. It powers up the sequence of events of the whole universe. This is evidenced by mathematics threaded through everything we observe. Natural structures repeatedly shows that math revealing patterns, like the spirals of galaxies, seashells and flower petals, align with the Fibonacci sequence and commonly known as fractals. Even crypto traders use this model to predict trading trends, also known as the golden rule. The Hebrew timeline starts in Genesis 1:1-3. We notice here God speaks everything into existence, and also the Spirit of God broods over the waters indicates plurality, a God family consisting of the same love essence. It can also be considered that the earth and universe existed before Genesis. The book of Job was the first creation account, and 2 other accounts followed. It is also important to carefully notice the words used. God says, "Let there be." Let is a different word to create from nothing, which is bara. When God said, "Let there be light," he was giving permission for light to show up out the shadows. The word created was only used for man. It is interesting that the Spirit of God was brooding over the waters, perhaps stirring the wake-up call. God does not say he created the earth, waters, and light on day 1 of creation. He said, "Let there be light," and let the waters separate. When we read in the book of Job, the earth was covered in a dark, thick, swaddling band, similar to when you wrap a baby in a rug, and also, in the new heaven and earth, there is no need for the sun as God's light is present. So whether the earth was darkened by the thick, dark, swaddling band that dissipated, or God's presence or cosmic light appeared, consider, however, that permission to regenerate or reconstitute or resurrect things that previously existed may have been actioned. Later, it is also written to replenish the earth. The command given was to redo the supply chain. In other words, the shelves are empty. Go fill them up again. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God spoke. The universe exploded into physical substance. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. In Hebrew, tohu wabohu means the earth was in a state of agitated chaos, a wasteland, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. In Hebrew, hovering is rachaf, root rahab. This is the same word used for an eagle brooding over her young. This Hebrew ancient text only records the beginning of humans like us. It doesn't tell us why the earth was a wasteland before we inhabited it about 6,000 years ago, nor does it tell us how old the earth is, so let it be whatever science determines it to be, 4.54 billion years. However, it can also be considered Earth existed before Genesis. Earth 2.0 has a few design updates. Day 4 of the creation protocol gave the Hebrews a time measurement indicator, a 24-hour day, a 7-day week. the sun and moon to govern and measure the years, times, and seasons. Therefore, record keeping of their ancestors' names, places, births, and deaths were memorized, then later recorded. Adam lived till he was 930 years of age. So many generations were born during that time frame alone. Storytelling and memories were passed down through these generations. Clean the slate. Just 12 generations after humanity blew it in Eden, a catastrophic breakdown in human nature left the planet in total ruin. Humanity had become so corrupted that a global apocalypse was locked in to wipe the slate clean. For 120 years, Noah and his sons operated on divine instructions, building a massive ark in plain sight while trying to warn everyone around them. Nobody listened. Noah's warnings fell entirely flat, leaving only 8 people. Noah, his wife, their 3 sons, and 3 daughters-in-law flagged as the only righteous people left alive. Even at the final hour, the ark's door stood wide open for 7 days as a final grace period, but the public just used it as an excuse to mock and troll them. People kept partying, eating, and celebrating weddings like everything was normal. Then a bride felt a drop on her forehead. The environment buckled, then torrents erupted from the sky and fountains burst from deep beneath the earth. It was epic. The ark was lifted up, elevated above the treachery of the rising flood waters. Imagine surviving a global apocalypse only for your grandson to initiate a massive, rebellious construction project a few centuries later. This was a human contingency plan to rescue themselves if a flood ever threatened them again. They decided they would save themselves. According to Hebrew timelines, the gap between Noah's flood and the Tower of Babel was incredibly tight, spanning just a few hundred years and a couple of generations. Because this history was fresh, the first-hand trauma and terror of the flood was still hardwired into everyone's minds. When the population abruptly split up at Babel and scattered across the earth, everyone scrambled to find their tribe and didn't just walk away with new languages. They carried the exact same core memories of the world ending by water. This abrupt dispersion explains why ancient mythology looks like a massive game of historical telephone. As people settled into new regions, that single shared history quickly splintered into localized legends, adapted to fit whatever new gods they gravitated towards, then adapting various cultural tactics that were unique to their survival. So instead of the event vanishing, the true story morphed into Mesopotamian epics, where the historical Noah was rebranded as Utnapishtim, and Noah's grandson Nimrod's adventure were blown up into the Epic of Gilgamesh. For modern readers today, these overlapping ancient texts aren't just religious stories, they are a mixed cross-cultural echo of a massive event that humanity simply couldn't forget. So the Epic of Gilgamesh did not have a single original source. Instead, it was expanded and woven together from earlier, independent Sumerian poems dating back to the 3rd dynasty of Ur. The standardized Epic of Gilgamesh, compiled by the scribe Sinleki Unnini around 1200 to 1000 BCE, took these separate pieces and elevated them into a deeper philosophical masterpiece. There are 12 clay tablets of the epic. Though tablets 4 and 5 are very short, they only elaborate his preparing for the next adventure. A clay tablet sits in a museum in London, another rests in Berlin, a third text survived in Hebrew and eventually became the opening pages of Genesis. All 3 speak about beginnings. All 3 emerged from the ancient Near East. Were they telling the same story, or were they answering the same questions in different ways? Then how does the Hebrew tradition compare? If ancient civilizations preserved parallel accounts of the beginnings, did they also preserve parallel expectations about humanity's future? Whether these flood narratives are shared memories of history or as borrowing or independent traditions, they show something remarkable in that these ancient people need to explain humanity's near destruction and a new beginning. Can these claims be supported by the available evidence? Before deciding, another pattern deserves our attention. Now, the ancient world not only remembered catastrophic floods, it also anticipated extraordinary individuals that history would one day be changed by the arrival of the hero that would come. Let's explore. Today, there persists echoes of a hero, a search for hope. This is blurry, considering mythical or real characters. However, both take the stage, whether Star Wars, The Matrix, Lord of the Rings, or The Ten Commandments. It is interesting that the top 3 screening longevity places. However, The Ten Commandments at 2 years, The Matrix 30 weeks, and Lord of the Rings 24 weeks. Of course, this is to be understood within the decade they represented. Humanity without hope is still a question that exists. When we approach the New Testament's account of Jesus' birth, should we place it in the same category as Greek and Roman stories of divine heroes, or as others might view them, as recurring mythological patterns? Some see them as counterfeits or distortions of a genuine promise first expressed in Genesis. What these stories actually say? What best explains the evidence? The seed vector and the disinformation campaign. Like the Marvel movies, we have a hero and a villain. The cosmic chess match begins. The evil one is crouching at the door, ready to devour this woman whose seed would ultimately rule. The enemy's end game is survival, so to stop the prophecy from coming true, he strategizes to ensure her elimination, hunting down and destroying that specific national genealogy through which the Messiah would one day come. Genesis 3:15, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." The evil one will have his head crushed by the seed of a woman. A permanent deadly blow has finality. The offspring of a virgin was to be the carriage through which the Son of God will become flesh and dwell among us. God prepared a body to enter into his own creation and take back the title deeds of the earth. The Messiah kept the law of God perfectly, conquering both sin and death. To counter this, the enemy needed to run false virgin mythological births and alternate flood stories to jump the gun on the events prophesied by God. The Gilgamesh epic was another attempt to minimize Noah's flood by making it look arbitrary and chaotic. The mythical virgin births were frequent in ancient times. Skeptics and mythicists loved to claim that the virgin birth of Jesus and the character of Mary were just a copy and paste job from older pagan myths. But if you talk to actual classical scholars and historians, they'll tell you those parallels are massively exaggerated. Almost none of these ancient stories actually feature a literal biological virgin giving birth without a male god physically getting involved. Here is the scandal on the pagan figures people constantly compare to Jesus and why their receipts don't match the data. If the following accounts seem ridiculous, so will the true virgin birth story be considered also ridiculous. Horus from Egypt. Osiris was murdered, chopped into pieces. She reassembled artificially inseminate herself. Krishna from Hinduism. Already married, given birth to 7 other kids before Krishna. Mithras from Persia, Rome, no mother, born out of a rock, wearing a hat. Dionysus from Greece. A pregnant Semele accidentally got vaporized by Zeus's sewed the unborn baby into his own thigh to finish the pregnancy. Romulus and Remus from Rome, the god Mars, ancient divine rape/intercourse. Attis, Phrygia/Rome, got pregnant as a magical pomegranate/almond fell into her lap. Buddha, India, a literal 6-tusked white elephant descending from heaven and entering her side during a dream. Is there a clear verdict? That's up to you to decide. Do these accounts serve as advanced propaganda that would cheapen the true virgin birth when it arrives, or to discard it as an anomaly to the natural laws as we understand them? Try assembling broken twigs from a river, or dreaming up an elephant with 6 tusks, or sewing pieces into your thigh to finish a pregnancy, perhaps bypassing birth and jumping directly out of a rock fully grown, wearing a hat, maybe being raped by Mars, or vaporized into existence, or a magic pomegranate or almond falling onto her lap. Can any of these resemble a real mother giving natural birth? No, but the narrative is planted in mythology, all of which are non-biological virgins. This was to set the wild narrative before an unusual miracle birth was to change history. Isaiah 9:6. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. The Egyptian Gambit. While the enemy is running alternate lines of history, his main tactical aim remains the same: eliminate the seed of the woman. Before Moses became the ultimate freedom fighter, the Egyptian government viewed the growing Hebrew population as a major national security threat. Pharaoh looked at the demographics, panicked about a potential immigrant uprising, and decided to launch a brutal population control campaign. It was a secret operation. This was Pharaoh's first move, a quiet backroom directive. He pulled aside the top Hebrew midwives Shiphrah and Puah and gave them a strict order that when delivering babies, if it's a boy, delete it at birth. If it's a girl, let it live. However, they resisted immediately. The midwives completely shunned his orders. They had too much moral integrity to play along, so they just made up excuses about how Hebrew women were too strong and too fast, and gave birth before the medics even arrived. When his covert operation failed, Pharaoh lost his mind and went ballistic. He then went completely public and issued a royal decree weaponizing the entire Egyptian population against Hebrew infants. He ordered every single citizen to throw newborn Hebrew boys directly into the Nile River to drown them while letting the girls live. This chess move wasn't just random cruelty. It was a cold, calculated military strategy. By systematically eliminating the males, Pharaoh was wiping out the next generation of potential rebels, warriors, and draft-age resistance leaders who could threaten his empire. From a cosmic standpoint, it was a demonic move to wipe out the seed of Abraham. Centuries later, King Herod would run the exact same play, ordering the slaughter of all toddler boys in Bethlehem in a desperate attempt to delete Jesus before he could finish the mission. Joseph and Mary escaped to Egypt in the middle of the night until it was safe to return, but the ultimate backfire was already in the wings. The irony is unbelievably wild. Pharaoh ordered the Nile to be a graveyard for Hebrew boys, but a Hebrew mother tarred a basket to waterproof it and turn the river into a delivery system. Moses literally sneaked right through the decree with his hidden sister peeping through the reeds, and it drifted straight into Pharaoh's own backyard and got adopted by the princess, getting raised with top-tier royal security. The very kid the empire tried to eliminate was being trained in their own palace to eventually take them down. Here Moses received a rigorous royal education in Egypt that included hieroglyphics, administration, and the traditions of the pharaohs, which equipped him with the literacy and historical knowledge necessary to compile the Pentateuch, a text of the Torah originally written in the Hebrew along with the creation account. Moses understood how to compare and differentiate the Egyptian and Hebrew records of creation. Unlearning the simulation, Growing up as a royal prince meant Moses didn't just lounge by the pools of the Nile River. He was given a top-tier, elite education in Egyptian politics, religion, and science. He was fully initiated into Egypt's bizarre, chaotic creation myths, like the idea that the universe hatched from a giant cosmic egg or that humanity was spun from the tears of the sun god Ra. But this elite palace training completely backfired on the empire. Instead of brainwashing Moses, it gave him the exact insider knowledge he needed to deconstruct their system. When he eventually wrote Genesis under divine inspiration, he took those flashy, high-budget Egyptian creation models and stripped them of their pagan noise. He converted the data back to the original Hebrew tradition, a clean record of an orderly, peaceful creator that humanity had largely forgotten or ignored but still had committed to memory, all this while serving pagan empires. Once Moses was ready, his return to Egypt wasn't just a political negotiation, it was a full-scale theological takedown. The 10 plagues weren't random natural disasters. They were a highly specific, targeted attack against the very gods Moses grew up studying in the palace. Blood in the Nile, a direct strike against Hapi, the god of the Nile, proving that Egypt's economic and physical life source was completely powerless. The plague of frogs, a brutal mockery of Heket, the frog-headed goddess of fertility and resurrection, turning her blessing into a rotting curse. The total darkness, Ra, the ultimate sun god and the supreme deity of Egypt's pantheon, was completely blacked out for 3 straight days, proving he couldn't even turn the lights on in his own kingdom. By the time Moses led his people out of Egypt, he had completely dismantled the mythology of the ancient world's greatest superpower, proving that the original Hebrew tradition wasn't a copy of pagan myths, it was the baseline reality all along. Why are there no wars between gods in Genesis? Nor was the sun ever named in Genesis 1. The fairness question. Why were we born into this world? Are we to feel unfairly treated, ripped off, as we are forced to live in a world we didn't choose, then have to face a God one day who set this up? There must have been a better way, like we don't want to be robots, but surely there are other options to deal with the consequences of evil. Is existence itself unfair, or has God provided a just and merciful answer to a problem we could never solve ourselves? Don't stress about being born into this world. That is insignificant. What isn't insignificant is that the seed of a woman crucified was left in an unrecognizable state. We can choose or reckon our response to the one who entered that world on our behalf. He offers perfect grace, and all you have to do is grab onto his coattails. The hero came, and you don't have to prove a standard of true love. It is about the hero who carried what you couldn't. For if, by the trespass of the one man, death reigned through that one man, how much more will those who receive God's abundant provision of grace and of the gift of righteousness reign in life through the one man, Jesus Christ? The evil one's head was crushed when Jesus was lifted up and the Messiah's heel was struck. But 3 days later, the evil one was defeated. He wasn't expecting the resurrection. This is interesting because at the time, the Hebrew text was written of how the Messiah would die, which was 1,000 years before the crucifixion. This technique for punishing criminals wasn't invented, the first historic record 518 BCE by the Persian king Darius I. So without this practice, the prophecy could not be fulfilled. The resurrection is now referred to as the Blessed Hope. We celebrate Good Friday and Resurrection Sunday each year, so confirmation of the resurrection gives us hope that we all will be raised. Jesus, the Son of God, conquered sin and death. He kept the law of God perfectly, and why is that significant? He also created the laws of physics, so everything we observed in a physical world is also held together by divine laws. Hebrew prophecies of the Messiah's death outlines the physical and procedural details of the event written roughly 1,000 years before. Psalm 22:16 states, "Dogs have surrounded me. A band of evil men has encircled me. They have pierced my hands and my feet." Psalm 22:18 prophesied the exact method used by Roman executioners to dispose of the victim's property. "They divide my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing." Zechariah 12:10 foretold that the victim would be pierced by onlookers. "They will look on me, the one they have pierced." Psalm 34:20 states, "He protects all his bones, not one of them will be broken." Historically, this was fulfilled when Roman soldiers broke the legs of the two criminals beside Jesus, but found Jesus already dead, leaving his bones unbroken. Isaiah 52:14 foretold the severe physical trauma beforehand. "His appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any man, and his form marred beyond human likeness." The above are only some of the hundreds of other specifications that have been confirmed and fulfilled. The probability of just 30 matches, a 1 in 10 to the 17th power, being fulfilled. Imagine 17 zeros. To understand why there is a cosmic conflict, we must first understand the cost of free will. The ability to choose love also includes the ability to reject it. Freedom opens the possibility of self-rule, the desire to place ourselves above others. We call it pride, envy, ambition, or jealousy. But at its heart is the desire to want what belongs to someone else. We see this from early childhood. They naturally want the toy another child is playing with. Adults may also envy a neighbor's house, wealth, status, or success. This is familiar because it is part of the human condition. According to the Hebrew narrative, this conflict did not begin on earth but in heaven. A magnificent heavenly being created with extraordinary beauty and honor, who had a covering precious jewels on the day he was created, became captivated by his own greatness. Instead of delighting in the worship of the Most High, he desired that honor for himself. Isaiah 14:12-15. "I will ascend, I will make myself like the Most High." With envy like that, the story introduces the conflict. This captivating being rejected the Creator's authority and became identified as the one who lies, kills, and destroys. The cosmic conflict is, at its core, a conflict over allegiance. From Genesis onward, the Hebrew scriptures describe history as more than a succession of events. They portray an ongoing conflict over allegiance, authority, and the direction of human civilization. Within the biblical worldview, that struggle unfolds against the backdrop of a larger cosmic conflict. At its heart lies a single question that echoes through every generation: to whom does humanity ultimately owe its allegiance?